Who's that one celebrity that has like no haters? Andre the Giant. I was fortunate enough to catch a screening of The Princess Bride in Nashville a couple of years ago. Carrie Ells, who plays the love interest, was there after the show and told some stories about working with different cast members. When he got to Andre, he recounted how he was the mood maker of the cast and always had a smile on his face. He even broke his foot during one of the last scenes but powered through it because the other actors had been filming all day and wanted to go home. A real shame that he passed away so prematurely. In the scene where they were ascending the cliff, they were hoisted by a rope and Wallace Shawn Vizzini was securely harnessed to Andre. Wallace was really freaked out about the height, but Andre calmed him by telling him to keep looking at Andre. Another anecdote, Andre always insisted on paying for dinners, no matter who he was with. One time he was out with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Arnold got up to attempt to hand his card to the waiter. Andre wasn't having it. He physically picked up Arnold and deposited him back in his seat. After the movie came out, the genius Lanny Poffo said that Andre carried a tape with him wherever he went and would insist that people watch it. Andre would order the most expensive food and wine up to the hotel rooms and show the movie. Poffo said that he was made to watch it every night for a week but had no problem since Andre was so proud of having been in a movie. That said, the Iron Sheik probably doesn't like him very much. Andre heard that he had been taking liberties with some of the underneath talent, so he told the bookers to put the two of them in a match. He proceeded to kick Sheik's ass 6 ways from Sunday for 20 minutes. My favorite John Candy story. Joe Montana was playing for the 49ers in an important game, may have even been the Super Bowl. His team is down. They've got a lot of ground to cover and not a lot of time to do it. Montana comes into the huddle and starts calling the play, then stops and points to the stands and says, "Hey, isn't that John Candy?" Teammates look over, and it is, indeed, John Candy. Turns out he was a big football fan. Montana returned his focus to the game and went on to lead a game-winning drive down the field. I effing love her story about how Walt Disney waited for her to give birth before filming Mary Poppins. Keep in mind that that stage Julie Andrews was nothing more than a mildly successful West End, Broadway actress. The fact that one of the biggest film producers at the time wanted her specifically to play Mary Poppins and he was happy to wait until after her pregnancy is a true testament to her phenomenal acting and singing ability. It paid off too. Julie Andrews won the Oscar for Best Actress for her role as Mary Poppins, her feature film debut too. I love Dolly, her music and just her in general. She's so sweet, kind and generous. I think there is something about growing up as poor as she did yet having a loving family who tried their hardest that makes a really special kind of person like Dolly. I've met people who were in the same situation, even if they didn't have a lot of money as an adult, that were just like her. When I was in Scotland I was on a bus tour and we passed the small lab where they made global news for cloning a sheep back in the 90s. I think it was the first successful cloning, but I'm not positive. The scientists named the sheep Dolly. Found out the reason they named the sheep Dolly. It was cloned from breast tissue. Till Dolly Parton has a random connection to one of the biggest scientific breakthroughs in history. They actually cast a guy called Stuart Townsend as Aragorn, but he was replaced with Viggo. After 4 days of shooting, they realized they needed an older actor for the part, because Townsend was in his 20s and too young to play Aragorn. Needless to say, Stuart Townsend was livid that he was replaced with a guy who was 20 years his senior. He didn't even get paid for the 2 months of training and prep. He has even refused to watch the films. If Viggo has a hater, it's this Townsend guy. I have a friend who was an extra in one of his movies in the 90s as a child. The extras were townies from a rural population who had never seen anything like a movie set and were taking pictures when the op or some other production person started throwing a fit about needing to confiscate cameras and for everyone to GTFO. Viggo jumped in and ripped the blowhard up, then posed for pictures and showed people around. There are certainly some haters for him. Even in the Jeopardy subreddit, he catches some flack.
https://www.reddit.com/r/8x1/anyone_else_create_back_source @_medium and @content post_title. Edit. Just to clarify, I don't watch much if any TV, so I don't have any feelings one way or another. I just remembered this from friends arguing. Also something about sexual misconduct of some sort, I think. To clarify, they argued about the sexual misconduct, with one talking about him being accused by someone on set, but I can't find any sources on it. I do not mean to impugn him or mislead anyone, but one of them did dislike Trebek for that reason. Edit 2. I followed up with one of the guys in the argument, and Buddy, who argued it was wrong. Alex Trebek was accused of being sexist comments from an interview, and John Leslie from Wheel of Fortune had sexual assault charge around the same time. Buddy conflated the two and argued as though they were both towards Trebek. My apologies for the misinformation, but thanks to you, David St. Hubbins, for following up on it. Surprised I didn't see this higher. He kinda is the whole rehabilitation package and actively gives back a lot. Won't play villains that win, actively gives talks in prison, and has tried to give Mexicans its very own superhero via machete. I work in reality TV and he was a guest judge on a show I did once. I don't deal with talent at all. A coworker and I were chatting when some 20 feet away Trejo comes out of his green room heading to stage with his people. He sees us watching him. He stops, walks over to us and says, "Hi, I'm Danny Trejo," and shakes both our hands, turns around and heads back towards stage. Kind and humble. I still wear the Trejo Coffee and Donuts t-shirt I got from his visit. I've known Chris personally for a long time. He taught me how important it was to find a connection with each and every person you come across. He still does whatever he can to meet with students from around the world. Ironically, I first met him when he was playing in a local Celtic band, and I had just finished grad school with his friend's daughter. Danny DeVito saved the life of a 13-year-old, who says, he's an adult now, that he was suicidal from the abuse he was enduring at a boarding school. On a ski trip, he was on a lift and DeVito, who sat next to him, noticed something was wrong and offered support, referencing the abuse he almost endured at a Catholic school. This guy says everyone ignored his cry for help, but DeVito saw a defeated teenager and was the first person to listen to him and believe him. Okay, don't come for me, but I never actually knew what Weird Al looked like. So I used to work in an airport, and I briefly interacted with a man, and thought to myself, this guy looks like a Weird Al. Turns out, later I was told he was Weird Al. Haha. I couldn't believe I immediately knew it was him without knowing it was him. He was super nice in person. Fucking infuriating what happened to this man. He's mocked to this day for speaking out about his sexual assault, and the press shows him zero empathy. Trash celebrity news websites post pictures of him at his worst, likely struggling with PTSD and trying to cope with what he's been through, and add taglines like "giving himself up," or "too fat for Hollywood." The guy who assaulted him didn't get in any trouble, and now Fraser is blacklisted and can hardly get any roles. He's been living a nightmare. Imagine waiting so long to speak out about what happened to you out of fear of repercussions, finally getting the strength to do some from a movement that encourages victims to speak out and empower themselves, and essentially being told you're the wrong kind of victim. And just mocked and blacklisted for years to come. Am I the only person who remembers how cruel the internet was to Keanu after the 90s and The Matrix? Everyone hated his acting and ragged on him so hard. People told him to quit acting. Then came the sad Keanu meme, and then came the good stories about him always helping people. I absolutely adore him, but let's not act like folks on the internet didn't hate on him for years.
Met him once briefly. He was nice enough. He was really great with his kid. What I liked was that he recognized someone in our group at a restaurant who he had done comedy with in the past. He approached our table. It was really bizarre and refreshing. I met him while he was filming a skateboarding thing with the barracks. He was genuinely really nice to everyone skating. He would scream "yeah" when someone did something and run over to give a high five, asked what trick names were and signed a bunch of boards and took photos. Made everyone stay in the building. This exactly. The King Chin has a very dry, sarcastic and cutting humor to him. He wasn't really pissed about the poster. He was just doing his thing and tearing into the guy because he thought it was funny. Bruce actually is a really nice guy. Back in the early days of the internet, his personal email address was one of the worst kept secrets. I got a hold of it and started talking with him, and we had some nice chats back and forth. He cheated on his wife with a co-star ... and his wife and children found out because photos emerged of him kissing her at an awards ceremony, and also thanked the co-star during an acceptance speech at the same awards ceremony, with no mention of his wife or kids who were at home watching ... Totally changed my opinion of all you. He literally limped into my doctor's office in the Midwest. WWE, may have been WWF at the time, was in town, and he had tweaked his knee in rehearsals. I don't live anywhere near LA or anything like that. Definitely thought it was a glitch in the Matrix. The only people who knew who he was were me, my mother, the head nurse, who had just taken a smoke break, and the doctor. Imagine watching Dwayne Johnson mumble 3 different spellings of his alias name, which was some complex name that wasn't Dwayne Johnson, then heave a great sigh, turn around, and sit down to wait for someone who knew who he was to arrive as the clueless front desk attendant squealed questions like "Who's your insurance carrier? Is this workers' comp? Who do you work for?" Question mark. Nurse arrived, eyes bulge, and she said, "Oh, you're here. Come on back." I don't know if athletes count as celebrities, but Chelsea footballer N'Golo Kante is right up there, worth millions and has won pretty much every major trophy you can win. The man drives a second-hand Mini Cooper. He also helped France win the World Cup and was so shy to hold the trophy that his teammates practically forced it on him. Another time he missed his Euro train back to London after a game and met some fans at the mosque, who invited him to eat dinner and play FIFA and watch the football match highlights at their house. Endless other acts of genuine humbleness, that even usually hostile rival fans just love the guy to bits. I once read an article, about 8 years ago, that said something to the effect that, at most, we can only hope to have 80% of the people who know us, or of us, that has a positive opinion about us. Even the most positive people have significant amounts of people who could not have a favorable opinion of them. I wish I could find that article again though. Steve Carell, not only an incredible actor, but genuinely seems like the nicest guy on the planet. I am currently listening to the podcast The Office Deep Dive by Brian Baumgartner, actor who plays Kevin. He shares his in-depth interviews with almost anyone who had anything to do with the show, and the overwhelming consensus is that Steve is a legitimately amazing human being. Virtually everyone started to get emotional talking about him. In his actual interview with Steve, you can tell how much he cares about people and see himself as just another guy. It's incredibly wholesome. I don't recall anyone ever particularly hating on Sir Patrick Stewart, excluding the beginning of Star Trek TNG. His castmates didn't like his stiff, businesslike, and sometimes rude demeanor, but they broke him of that. Everyone said Patrick was great after that. Also, related since they're best friends, I also don't think I've ever seen hate directed at Sir Ian Coven, either. Dude, as long as you're known, there's going to be someone, somewhere with some shitty excuse to hate you, even if you're the best, kindest, sweetest cinnamon roll out there, always. But if I had to nominate someone, I'd say Viggo Mortensen, because Keanu had haters because of so many schmucks making him a perfect demigod embodiment of kindness and humility. Looking at you, Reddit. I'm probably late to the party, but James Gandolfini, every single person who worked with him are in awe of him. When he was given the choice of where to travel on a publicity tour for The Sopranos, he chose Iraq, to show support for the troops there. He also went on to make a documentary about the physical and mental injuries of veterans after coming home from Iraq. Someone probably commented this already, but Mr. Rogers, Fred McFeely Rogers, the GOAT, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood aired for 895 episodes and helped 2-3 generations of children better understand the world they were living in when sometimes there was nobody at home to give them any love and attention. Man was a saint. No skeletons in the closet. Almost single-handedly got adequate congressional funding for PBS. Increased from $9 million to $22 million. Had everyone from the far left to the far right going, yeah, he's pretty cool. I hope one day I may succeed in being 1/10th as loving and kind as Mr. Rogers. Daniel Trejo, he's a convicted drug felon who served time in Alcatraz, came out and decided to keep up his act through AA/NA before going on to help other young kids struggling with substances and the pursuit of a criminal lifestyle. Even on set, he's called out actors like Tom Cruise who insist on performing their own stunts as selfish because it completely shuts down production. He forces people on an unpaid hiatus if the stunt ends up injuring the actor. Yeah, he plays a bad motherfucker, but behind the camera he's a stand-up guy trying to help his community. Zendaya, Maggie Smith, Hugh Jackman, Steve Irwin, Jack Black, Dave Grohl and Bob Ross all seem absolutely impossible to hate. Zendaya in particular is a hill I'm willing to die on, and that's totally not because I have the biggest crush ever on her, which I clearly don't. Obvious honorable mention to Keanu Reeves, but he's not even human anymore at this point. I figured we were letting God himself out of this conversation. Eddie Van Halen, the Guitar Hero. Many people have said that he always had a smile on his face, and he was always ready and happy to play. Kurt Cobain, he had a major effect on many people's lives. He was a supporter of different women's rights movements, so that'd definitely give him a lot of fans, and he always had a good sense of humor. He also stood by his principles, which resulted in a feud between Guns N' Roses and Nirvana, because Guns N' Roses stood for everything that Nirvana was against. But that was eventually ended. Both of them died way too early. Tom Petty was super cool. If anyone hated him, they can get off this planet cause they are obviously aliens. When filming Postman, one of my friends growing up and her family were extras. Her dad supplied Tom with weed while he was there, haha. Her little sister though. So, little sister Sarah had these hillbilly parents, so of course she knew who Tom Petty was. Even at 4 years old, she was with the other extras and saw him and got excited, running over to meet him. His bodyguards blocked her. Tom was like, WTF, she's just a little girl, and she knows who I am. I'm flattered. Let her through. They spent a couple hours in a lawn chair on top of the dam. That's where they built the town, sitting together, and he was basically helping her learn to read his lines as he practiced them, sounding words out for her and moving his finger on the page. He was one cool man. Keanu Reeves. I feel like he caught a lot of shit and hate when he first started acting because he was dry and emotionless. Then The Matrix came out and I thought he was perfect for that role. Years passed and nobody heard anything about him, then boom, John fucking Wick came out and everyone I know was loving him because of that movie. Dr. Keanu Reeves had haters. Now I don't think he does cause of John Wick. Danny DeVito saved the life of a 13-year-old, who says, he's an adult now, that he was suicidal from the abuse he was enduring at a boarding school. On a ski trip, he was on a lift and DeVito, who sat next to him, noticed something was wrong and offered support, referencing the abuse he almost endured at a Catholic school. This guy says everyone ignored his cry for help, but DeVito saw a defeated teenager and was the first person to listen to him and believe him. Adam Sandler. Even though he's worth millions, he's still humble as hell, goes everywhere with no security or anything, just rocking basketball shorts and an oversized t-shirt. I've also seen many people say he was just genuinely nice when they've met him. You never hear bad press about him,